The Grand Meridian Hotel stood as a gleaming monument to luxury in the heart of Chicago, its 37 floors of marble and gold towering over the city like a beacon of exclusivity. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across the lobby, where Italian marble columns rose like sentinels, framing a space that felt more like a Renaissance palace than a hotel. Every detail was meticulous. Fresh orchids in crystal vases perfumed the air, gold fixtures caught the evening light with calculated precision, and staff moved with the synchronized grace of a Swiss watch. This was Trevor Hamilton's kingdom, and at 42, he ruled it with the unyielding confidence of a man who'd never been denied. From his corner office on the 37th floor. Trevor adjusted his platinum cufflinks, his steel-gray suit tailored on Savile Row during a recent London trip, hugging his lean 6-foot frame. His sandy brown hair swept back with just enough gray at the temples to suggest authority, framed glacier blue eyes that could silence a subordinate mid-sentence. Through the massive windows, he surveyed the lobby far below, where the evening's guests were arriving. Senators in understated power suits, tech moguls in bespoke casual European aristocrats whose names carried centuries of weight. These were the clientele who paid $5,000 a night to breathe the rarefied air of Chicago's elite, and Trevor ensured their experience was flawless. His phone buzzed with a text from his ex-wife. "Rebecca Sophie's piano recital is Thursday at 7. Please don't miss this one." He set the phone aside without replying. His 8-year-old daughter's event would have to wait. The Grand Meridian demanded his full attention tonight. Rumors had swirled for weeks that International Grandeur Holdings, the parent company of the hotel chain, was sending someone for an unannounced inspection. Corporate usually gave him a heads up, but lately they'd been muttering about cultural assessments and accountability terms that grated against Trevor's belief in his own perfection. The Grand Meridian boasted the highest guest satisfaction scores in the chain 98th percentile, to be exact. "What more could they want?" he muttered, straightening his emerald silk tie. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Kelly Morrison, his assistant of 3 years, entered with a crystal tumbler of Macallan 25, neat, her auburn hair pulled into a flawless chignon. At 34, Kelly had the organizational prowess of a military general, her wire-rimmed glasses lending a scholarly air to her sharp efficiency. "Evening shift report, sir," she said, setting the bourbon on his mahogany desk. "Everything's running smoothly. The ambassador suite is hosting the Johnson Pharmaceutical family, and the presidential suite has that tech entrepreneur from Seattle." Trevor took a sip, savoring the burn. "Any issues?" Kelly hesitated, adjusting her glasses. "Well, one thing. The front desk mentioned a guest who seemed confused about his reservation. He insisted he had a booking, but he's not in our system." Trevor's jaw tightened. "Did they handle it?" "Yes, sir. Standard protocol offered to help him find accommodations elsewhere." Trevor nodded, satisfied. The Grand Meridian's reputation hinged on maintaining an aura of exclusivity. Random people wandering in with questionable reservations couldn't be tolerated. "Anything else? Your 7:00 p.m. dinner with the Morrison Foundation Board has been moved to the Crimson Room. Chef Laurent prepared the Wagyu specially." Trevor smiled. Everything in his world clicked into place with precision. Every detail curated to maintain the Meridian's impeccable atmosphere. He dismissed Kelly and turned back to the window, watching the lobby's choreography unfold below. The doormen in royal blue uniforms stood like statues. The concierge desk hummed with quiet efficiency, and guests moved through the space like actors in a meticulously directed play. This was his masterpiece, and nothing, not corporate meddling, not his ex-wife's nagging, not a single out-of-place guest would disrupt it. Across town, Dr. James Carter sat in his sleek black Audi, the Chicago skyline glowing against the evening sky. Rain streaked the windshield, blurring the golden lights of the Grand Meridian into a watercolor haze. At 38, James had climbed every rung of corporate America's ladder through sheer intellect and relentless drive. His dark skin carried the quiet confidence of a man who'd earned his place in rooms not built for him, his tailored navy blazer and crisp white shirt projecting authority. His close-cropped hair and neatly trimmed beard framed a face that held both warmth and resolve, his brown eyes sharp with the kind of intelligence that made boardrooms fall silent. That morning, a call from International Grandeur Holdings had confirmed his new role, Regional Director of Operations for their North American division, overseeing 14 luxury hotels with the Grand Meridian as the crown jewel. The assignment was clear conduct, a comprehensive assessment of the Chicago property starting tonight. James checked his phone where a text from his best friend Marcus waited. "New job? Boss man. How's it feel to run the show?" James smiled, typing back. "About to find out. Heading to the hotel now." Marcus, his college roommate from Morehouse, had been his sounding board through every challenge, every microaggression, every skeptical glance, every moment when James wondered if he was enough. "You got this," Marcus replied. "Show those suits what a real leader looks like." James stepped out of his car into the chilly Chicago night, the October wind biting through his blazer. The Grand Meridian loomed ahead, its marble facade and brass accents radiating opulence. Two doormen flanked the entrance, their postures rigid as they pulled open the heavy glass doors. "Good evening, sir," one said, his voice polite but clipped. James nodded, his loafers clicking against the marble floor as he entered the lobby. The space was breathtaking, vaulted ceilings disappearing into shadow crystal chandeliers, casting a warm glow, orchids perfuming the air with delicate sweetness. Guests moved through the room like characters in a high-budget film, women in designer gowns, men in custom tuxedos, their hushed conversations hinting at deals worth millions. James approached the concierge desk, where a young woman with sleek blonde hair offered a practiced smile. "Good evening, sir. How may I assist you?" James extended his business card, its embossed logo catching the light. "I'm Dr. James Carter. I have a reservation under my name." The woman's fingers danced across her keyboard, her smile faltering. "I'm sorry, Dr. Carter, but I don't see a reservation under that name for tonight." James felt a familiar knot in his stomach. "That's impossible. My assistant confirmed it yesterday." "Could you check again?" More typing, her frown deepening. "I've checked all possible spellings. There's no reservation for James Carter. Perhaps it's under another name. International Grandeur Holdings. Maybe." The woman's expression shifted subtle, but James caught it. A flicker of skepticism he'd seen too many times before. "Let me speak with my manager," she said, stepping away. James felt eyes on him. Turning slightly, he noticed a group of guests near the elevators. A silver-haired man in a tuxedo whispered to his companion, who glanced at James with thinly veiled curiosity. James straightened his shoulders. His years in corporate boardrooms, conference halls, and elite networking events having taught him to weather such scrutiny. He'd been the only black man in countless spaces his presence often questioned before his credentials could speak. The concierge returned with a tall man in his 50s, his name tag reading Gerald Front Desk Manager. "Dr. Carter." Gerald said, his smile tight. "I understand there's some confusion about your reservation." James kept his voice even. "No confusion on my end. I have a confirmed reservation for tonight through tomorrow. This is my first visit to the property, and I'm eager to experience its reputation." Gerald's fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced ease. After a moment, he looked up, his eyes apologetic but firm. "I'm terribly sorry, Dr. Carter, but we have no record of your reservation." Perhaps there was an error with your booking agent. James felt heat rising in his chest. I made the reservation myself through your corporate booking system. I have the confirmation number. He pulled out his phone, scrolling to the email, confirmation GH47829QI. Here, Gerald studied the screen, his brow furrowing. This number, it doesn't match our format. I'm afraid it may be fraudulent. The word hit James like a slap. Fraudulent. I don't mean to suggest you created it intentionally, Gerald added quickly, but sometimes scam websites generate fake confirmations. You may have been misled. James's mind raced. He'd booked through the company's internal system using executive access codes. Fraud was impossible. There's a misunderstanding, he said, his voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath. I'm actually... A deep voice cut him off from behind. Is there a problem here? Trevor Hamilton approached his gray suit, radiating authority, his stride commanding the room. Staff straightened instinctively, and nearby guests turned to watch. Trevor's eyes swept over James. His blazer, his posture, the phone in his hand, his expression already hardening with judgment. Gerald Trevor said, his voice carrying absolute control. What's the issue? Gerald stood taller. Mr. Hamilton, this is Dr. Carter. He believes he has a reservation, but we can't locate it. Trevor's gaze settled on James, taking in his appearance with a clinical detachment. Something about James's presence felt out of place to Trevor. Not his clothes, which were clearly expensive, not his demeanor, which carried the polish of someone used to respect, but something deeper, something Trevor's instincts told him didn't belong in the Grand Meridian's curated world. Dr. Carter. Trevor said, his smile cold. I'm Trevor Hamilton, CEO of the Grand Meridian. I understand you're having difficulty with your reservation. James turned to face him, fully meeting his eyes without flinching. Mr. Hamilton, thank you for your attention. I have a confirmed reservation, but your staff seems unable to find it. He held up his phone again. Here's the confirmation number. Trevor glanced at the screen, barely registering it. I see. And where did you make this reservation through your corporate booking system? James replied, his tone measured. Trevor's eyebrows lifted slightly. Corporate. And you work for James. Hesitated. He'd planned to reveal his position later after observing the hotel as a guest, an unannounced inspection tactic. I work in hospitality management, he said carefully. Trevor's smile tightened. He'd dealt with industry types before, competitors sniffing around consultants angling for contracts, all with the same rehearsed confidence. I see. He turned to Gerald. Show me the confirmation number. Gerald tilted the phone toward Trevor, who made a show of studying it. This doesn't appear legitimate, he said, handing the phone back. I'm afraid someone may have taken advantage of you. James's composure wavered, a flicker of anger breaking through. That's impossible. I booked it myself. Sir Trevor said, his tone now patronizing. I understand this is frustrating, but we cannot honor a fraudulent reservation. I'd be happy to have my staff assist you in finding accommodations elsewhere. The word elsewhere carried a deliberate edge, a challenge James recognized instantly. Elsewhere, James repeated, his voice low. Trevor was already turning away, dismissing him. Gerald, provide Dr. Carter with a list of nearby hotels that might suit his needs. The lobby's rhythm faltered. Guests paused their conversations, staff exchanged nervous glances, the air thick with anticipation. James felt the weight of every eye, the familiar sting of being judged not for his credentials, but for his skin. Mr. Hamilton, he called, his voice cutting through the silence. Trevor turned back, impatience flashing across his face. Yes, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Trevor's voice rose just enough to carry to nearby guests. The only misunderstanding is someone thinking they can walk into the Grand Meridian with a fake reservation and expect us to accommodate fraud." The lobby fell silent, the accusation hanging like a guillotine. James felt the burn of humiliation, the collective gaze of strangers labeling him an outsider. "I'm not attempting fraud," he said, his voice steady despite the rage boiling inside. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," Trevor said, stepping closer, his height a deliberate intimidation. "If you refuse, I'll have security escort you out." James scanned the lobby, the guests pretending not to stare, the staff avoiding his gaze, the marble and gold suddenly feeling like a courtroom where he'd been convicted without trial. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. Trevor's laugh was sharp, dismissive. The only mistake would be letting this disruption continue. He signaled, and 2 security guards in dark suits appeared, their presence scattering nearby guests. James recognized the moment for what it was, a choice between dignity and a public scene that would haunt him online. "That won't be necessary," he said, slipping his phone into his pocket. "I'll leave." But as he turned toward the exit, something inside him rebelled. He thought of every time he'd swallowed his pride, every slight he'd endured, every moment he'd made himself smaller to fit someone else's comfort. He stopped and turned back to Trevor, who was already waving off the guards. "Mr. Hamilton," Trevor's irritation was palpable. "Sir, I thought we were done. We're not done," James said, his voice carrying across the lobby like a blade. "I want you to remember this moment, exactly as it happened." Trevor's face flushed. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm asking you to remember," James said, his eyes locked on Trevor's. "Because in about 20 minutes, you're going to wish you had." The glass doors closed behind him with a soft hiss, sealing his humiliation inside the Grand Meridian's golden walls. Outside, the Chicago rain soaked his blazer, but James stood tall, his resolve hardening. He didn't know it yet, but those doors would soon open again, and when they did, everything would change. The rain had stopped, but the Chicago night clung to a damp chill as Dr. James Carter sat in his Audi, the golden glow of the Grand Meridian Hotel fading in his rearview mirror. His hands gripped the steering wheel knuckles tight as he processed the humiliation that still burned in his chest. In the span of 15 minutes, he'd been accused of fraud, publicly shamed, and escorted out of a lobby where he was supposed to be not just a guest, but the new regional director of International Grandeur Holdings. The weight of it, decades of hard-won achievements reduced to a single dismissive glance from Trevor Hamilton, felt like a betrayal of everything he'd fought for. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "How's the fancy hotel life, boss? You sipping champagne yet?" James stared at the screen, the words blurring through a haze of anger and disbelief. How could he explain this to Marcus, who'd celebrated every milestone with him from their Morehouse days to James's rise through corporate ranks? How could he admit that, despite his PhD, his published papers, his corner office credentials, he'd been treated like an intruder in a space he was meant to lead? He typed a reply, fingers trembling. Something happened. "I'll call you later." Marcus's response was immediate. "Yo, you okay? What's going on?" James set the phone aside, unable to answer. His work phone buzzed, next the secure line for International Grandeur Holdings executives. The caller ID showed Patricia Wells, Senior Vice President of Operations, his new direct supervisor. He let it go to voicemail, then it rang again. On the third call, he answered, his voice steady, despite the storm inside. "Dr. Carter speaking." Patricia's voice was crisp, edged with concern. "James, I've been trying to reach you. How's the Chicago assessment going?" James closed his eyes, the weight of the moment pressing down. "Patricia, we need to talk. I'm not settled in. In fact, I was just removed from the Grand Meridian." Silence stretched across the line long enough to make James wonder if the call had dropped. When Patricia spoke again, her tone had shifted to corporate crisis mode. "Removed, explain." James took a breath, keeping his voice controlled. "The CEO, Trevor Hamilton, accused me of having a fraudulent reservation and had me escorted out by security, publicly, in front of guests and staff." Patricia's response was sharp. "That's unacceptable. Are you certain you used the correct booking codes?" The question stung even from someone who'd championed his promotion. "Patricia, I've been booking executive reservations for a decade. I used the corporate portal, my access codes, everything was correct. I showed them the confirmation number. They called it fake." Another pause, then Patricia's voice returned all business. "Where are you now?" "In my car outside the hotel." "Stay there. I'm conferencing in legal and security. This is a serious breach." As James waited, his phone lit up with the incoming call. Patricia's voice came through, joined by Martin Brooks, the company's legal counsel, and Jennifer Walsh, head of corporate security. Martin, a no-nonsense attorney in his late 40s, spoke first. "Dr. Carter, walk us through exactly what happened." James recounted the evening, the concierge's initial dismissal, Gerald's insistence that the confirmation was invalid, Trevor's authoritative intervention, the accusation of fraud, the security guards. As he spoke, he could hear keyboards clicking, notes being taken, protocols snapping into place. "You're certain about the confirmation number?" Jennifer asked, her voice clipped from years in law enforcement. "Absolutely. I can forward the email now." "Do it," Martin said. James sent the email, his fingers moving with precision despite the adrenaline. "Received," Jennifer confirmed. "Martin, what's our exposure here?" Martin's sigh was audible. "Significant. If this was racially motivated, which it sounds like, we're looking at potential civil rights violations, not to mention a PR disaster." Patricia cut in. "Has anyone spoken to Hamilton?" "Not yet," Jennifer replied, "but he's about to get a wake-up call." James felt a flicker of grim satisfaction. "What happens now?" "Now," Patricia said, "we fix this. Jennifer, I want a full investigation launched immediately, security footage, staff interviews, everything. Martin, prepare for damage control. James, check into the Ritz-Carlton downtown. Corporate will cover it. Tomorrow morning you're going back to the Grand Meridian, but this time as regional director." James nodded, though no one could see him. "I'll be ready." Martin added, "Don't post anything online. Don't talk to reporters, and document every detail. This is going to get messy." The call ended, and James sat in the silence of his car, staring at the Grand Meridian's towering facade. Somewhere inside, Trevor Hamilton was likely congratulating himself on protecting his hotel's standards. He had no idea his world was about to collapse. Back at the Grand Meridian, Trevor leaned back in his leather chair, the Macallan 25 warming his chest as he scrolled through guest feedback emails. One caught his eye, from Harrison Blackwell of Blackwell Industries, a manufacturing tycoon whose corporate account brought in $2.3 million annually. "Mr. Hamilton," the email read, "I commend your professionalism in handling the lobby incident tonight. Your commitment to maintaining the Grand Meridian standards is exactly why we continue to partner with you." Trevor smiled, the validation soothing any lingering unease from the confrontation with James Carter. Blackwell's approval meant influence, and influence meant job security. The Grand Meridian wasn't just a hotel. It was a sanctuary for Chicago's elite, and Trevor had ensured it remained that way. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Kelly entered, her expression uncharacteristically tense. "Sir, the evening reports." She set a leather portfolio on his desk, hesitating. But there's something else. Gerald mentioned the lobby incident. He's concerned. Trevor's jaw tightened. Gerald needs to focus on his job, not second-guess my decisions. Kelly adjusted her glasses, a nervous tick. Of course, sir. It's just, he said. Dr. Carter seemed very confident, like he knew something we didn't. Trevor's laugh was sharp. Let him try to make trouble. The Grand Meridian's reputation isn't built on accommodating fraudsters. Kelly nodded, but her unease lingered. Should I send Gerald up? Yes, I want to ensure we're all aligned on tonight's events. As Kelly left, Trevor turned back to his computer. Occupancy at 97% average room rate. 800 guest satisfaction in the 98th percentile. Everything was perfect. He'd protected his masterpiece, and nothing else mattered. Meanwhile, at the Willis Tower, the 42nd floor hummed with the quiet efficiency of corporate power. James stepped off the elevator, his charcoal gray power suit immaculate despite the sleepless night. Dark circles under his eyes betrayed his exhaustion, but his stride carried the focus of a man ready for battle. Patricia Wells greeted him, her silver hair pulled into a severe bun that matched her expression. At 58, she'd shattered glass ceilings in hospitality management with calculated precision. James, thank you for coming in early. James shook her hand firmly. I want this resolved quickly. So do we, Patricia said, gesturing toward a conference room where 3 others waited. You know Martin Brooks from legal. Martin, a tall black man with wire-rimmed glasses, stood to shake James's hand. Dr. Carter, what happened to you is unacceptable. We're building a case as we speak, Patricia continued, and Jennifer Walsh, head of corporate security. Jennifer, a compact woman with short auburn hair and law enforcement alertness, nodded. I'm pulling security footage from the Grand Meridian now. We'll have it within the hour. The third person was new, a young woman with dark skin and sharp brown eyes behind stylish glasses. This is Aisha Patel, our Director of Diversity and Inclusion, Patricia said. I asked her to join us because this incident raises serious questions about our culture. Aisha extended her hand. Dr. Carter, I'm sorry we're meeting like this. I've been with the company 6 months and already identified troubling patterns in guest complaints. James took his seat at the head of the mahogany table, the position feeling both natural and heavy with responsibility. What kind of patterns? Aisha opened her tablet, scrolling through data. In the past 18 months, the Grand Meridian has received 12 complaints about discriminatory treatment, all from guests of color, all dismissed as misunderstandings by local management. The room fell silent. Martin's pen paused on his legal pad. 12. Patricia's voice was tight. 12 documented complaints, Aisha corrected. The real number is likely higher, as many guests don't file formal complaints when they feel unheard. James felt a cold weight in his stomach. And Trevor Hamilton's response: consistent denial. Aisha said, swiping to a new screen. Here's one from last summer. Dr. and Mrs. Thompson, both professors from Atlanta, were questioned about their ability to afford the presidential suite despite having a confirmed reservation and diamond loyalty status. Hamilton's response: standard policy verification. No discrimination found. Jennifer leaned forward. How much revenue have we lost? Conservatively $800,000 in direct bookings. Aisha replied, her voice clinical but laced with anger. That's not counting referrals or repeat business. The Grand Meridian generates $120 million annually. These incidents are a systemic issue, damaging our brand. Patricia rubbed her temples. Why wasn't this escalated? James answered, his voice quiet but certain. Because Trevor controls the narrative. Local management investigates itself, finds no fault, and the complaints vanish. Martin nodded grimly. A perfect system for avoiding accountability until now. James's phone buzzed with a text from his assistant online chatter on hospitality forums about last night. Someone posted praising Trevor for maintaining standards. James's jaw clenched as he showed the group. Harrison Blackwell, he said, disgust evident, a guest in the lobby. He's praising Trevor for professional service recovery. Patricia's face flushed. Blackwell Industries has a $2.3 million account with us. If he's publicly endorsing discrimination, we have a bigger problem. Martin cut in. If this hits social media before we control the narrative, we're looking at a boycott. James stood walking to the window overlooking Chicago's skyline. Somewhere out there, Trevor was starting his day oblivious to the storm gathering above him. What's our next move? Jennifer consulted her notes. Security footage from 5:00 p.m. to 8:00 p.m. is on its way. I'm pulling staff schedules and complaint logs to check for patterns. We'll need until tomorrow morning for an airtight case. Patricia nodded. Fine, but we don't tip Hamilton off yet. James turned back, his voice sharp. I agree. We need the footage and staff interviews first. If Trevor knows we're investigating, he'll coach his team and cover his tracks. Martin nodded. Smart. We need hard evidence before he can spin this. Patricia met James's gaze. Tomorrow, you return to the Grand Meridian, James. Not as a guest, but as the regional director. Trevor Hamilton will learn exactly who he threw out. At the Grand Meridian, Trevor's morning began with his sacred routine, Ethiopian single-origin coffee, the Wall Street Journal, and a review of last night's revenue, $347,000 solid for a Tuesday. He smiled, preparing for the 10:00 a.m. staff meeting, where he'd reinforce the importance of maintaining standards. The lobby incident with James Carter was already a fading memory filed away with countless other disruptions he'd handled over the years. A knock broke his focus. Kelly entered, carrying a silver coffee service, her expression unreadable. Your usual, sir, she said, setting it down. Anything urgent? She hesitated, rearranging sugar cubes, Trevor never used. Sir Corporate called 3 times this morning, International Grandeur Holdings. They're requesting information about last night's incident. Trevor's hand paused mid-sip. What kind of information? Security footage, staff schedules, complaint logs. They specifically asked about Dr. James Carter. The coffee turned bitter in his mouth. What did you tell them that you'd call back personally? Trevor's mind raced. Why was corporate so interested in a minor incident, Kelly? Pull Dr. Carter's information from last night. Her face tightened. Sir, there is no information. He's not in our system. But Gerald said something this morning. He checked the confirmation number after you left. And it was legitimate. It matched the corporate booking format booked through the Executive Access portal. Trevor's world tilted. The executive portal was for VIPs and senior management. What's the executive portal? He asked, voice low. It's for International Grandeur Holdings executives and their guests. Only senior management has access. Trevor stared at Kelly pieces clicking into place. James's confidence, his warning, corporate's sudden interest. Get Gerald up here! Now! As Kelly left, Trevor walked to his window, looking down at the lobby, where he'd confronted James. For the first time in years, a cold thread of fear snaked through him. Who was Dr. James Carter? His phone rang, the caller ID flashing International Grandeur Holdings Executive Office. His hand trembled as he reached for it. The storage unit smelled of dust and regret. its concrete floor cold under Trevor Hamilton's knees as he sorted through the wreckage of his former life. Framed awards from hospitality conferences, photos with industry titans, a polished nameplate reading, Trevor Hamilton, CEO, Grand Meridian Hotel, all relics of a career now reduced to rubble. His once pristine suit was rumpled. His pewter silk tie loosened his sandy hair, disheveled for the first time in years. At 42, Trevor had never imagined himself here, surrounded by boxes of a past that no longer existed. The call from Patricia Wells earlier that morning had been brutal in its brevity. Dr. James Carter was the new regional director of International Grandeur Holdings' North American division, and Trevor's actions accusing James of fraud and ejecting him from the lobby had cost him everything. Terminated for cause, no severance, no references, an 18-month non-compete clause, ensuring he couldn't work in luxury hospitality anywhere near Chicago. His reputation, meticulously built over a decade, was radioactive. His phone buzzed relentlessly, reporters, former colleagues, even a headhunter fishing for gossip, but he'd silenced it hours ago. Denver was his next stop, where his brother had offered a couch and a chance to start over in some anonymous job far from the world of five-star hotels. Maybe construction, maybe retail, anything to escape the shame that clung to him like damp Chicago air. As he packed a photo of his daughter Sophie, her bright eyes beaming from a piano recital he'd missed, a shadow fell across the storage unit's entrance. Trevor looked up, expecting the facility manager. Instead, Dr. James Carter stood there, his camel-colored coat sharp against the dim light, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, neither spoke. Trevor scrambled to his feet, clutching the photo. "Dr. Carter?" he stammered. "What are you doing here?" James stepped inside, his eyes scanning the scattered remnants of Trevor's career. "I came to ask you a question, Mr. Hamilton." "What are you going to do now?" The words hit like a challenge, exposing the void Trevor had been avoiding. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice raw. "Leave Chicago. Start over somewhere else. Try to forget this ever happened." James nodded slowly, his gaze steady. "That's what I thought you'd say." He turned to leave, and something desperate surged in Trevor's chest. "Dr. Carter, wait." James paused, his back still to Trevor. "I'm sorry," Trevor said, the words spilling out. "I know it doesn't change anything, but I'm sorry for what I did to you, to the others, to everyone I hurt." James turned, his brown eyes searching Trevor's face. "Are you sorry because you got caught, or because you understand what you did?" Trevor met his gaze, knowing his answer would define him. "Because I understand." James studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Then maybe it's time to stop running and start learning." He handed Trevor a card with the name of a community organization, New Horizons Community Services. "They work with people you've spent years looking down on. Start there." Then he was gone, leaving Trevor alone with his shame and a flicker of something new purpose. 3 months later, Trevor stood in a cramped office at New Horizons, a nonprofit tucked in a Chicago neighborhood he'd never set foot in during his Grand Meridian days. The walls were plastered with flyers about housing assistance and job training, the air thick with the scent of instant coffee and determination. Trevor wore khakis and a button-down, his cufflinks replaced by rolled-up sleeves, his hands calloused from weeks of sorting donations and moving furniture for families in need. His first day as a volunteer had been humbling, carrying boxes of canned goods, while a single mother of 3 explained how she'd lost her apartment to a rent hike. He'd listened, really listened for the first time in years, hearing the weight of a life he'd never considered. Now, as a part-time housing coordinator, he helped families navigate Chicago's brutal rental market, connecting them with landlords who didn't demand perfect credit or six-figure incomes. Most of his clients were people of color immigrants or low-income workers, people he'd once dismissed as not belonging in his hotel's marble lobby. Each interaction chipped away at the worldview he'd built, revealing how his standards had been a thinly veiled excuse for prejudice. One afternoon he sat across from Maria, a Honduran immigrant whose retail job barely covered her kids' school supplies. "Mr. Trevor," she said, her accent thick but her gratitude clear, "you found us a place we can afford? My boys can stay in their school now." Trevor smiled, a warmth spreading in his chest that no Macallan 25 had ever provided. "Just doing my job, Maria." But it wasn't just a job. It was a reckoning. Every lease signed, every family housed felt like a small atonement for the 47 guests he'd wronged at the Grand Meridian. That evening, Trevor attended his first session of the bias training program, developed by Dr. James Carter, a requirement New Horizons had recommended. The facilitator, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Aisha Patel, stood before a diverse group of volunteers and staff, her tablet glowing with data. "Unconscious bias," Aisha began, "is when we make snap judgments based on appearance, upbringing, or environment without realizing it. These judgments shape how we treat people, whether we hire them, serve them, or in some cases, exclude them." Trevor shifted in his chair, the words hitting close. Aisha showed a video of a black man in a suit being questioned at a luxury store, the staff assuming he couldn't afford to shop there. Trevor's stomach churned. It was like watching a replay of his confrontation with James. During the discussion, he raised his hand, voice unsteady. "I used to think I wasn't biased because I didn't hate anyone. But I made assumptions about who belonged in my space, and it hurt people." The room went quiet. Eyes turning to him, Aisha nodded, not unkindly. "Recognizing that is the first step. The next is changing your actions." Trevor left the session rattled but determined, signing up for every module of the program. He devoured James's thesis, addressing implicit bias in luxury hospitality, which outlined how exclusionary practices eroded trust and revenue. For the first time, Trevor saw his past decisions not as protecting standards, but as perpetuating harm. Back at New Horizons, Trevor's work began to shift. He wasn't just coordinating housing, he was listening to stories of systemic barriers of dreams deferred by landlords who saw skin color before credit scores, of resilience that humbled him. One client, Jamal, a 22-year-old mechanic, reminded Trevor of James Carter. Jamal had been denied apartments despite a steady job, his applications dismissed with vague excuses. "They look at me and see trouble," Jamal said, frustration etching his face. Trevor spent hours calling landlords, vouching for Jamal's reliability until they secured a one-bedroom near his shop. When Jamal shook his hand, saying, "Man, you didn't give up," Trevor felt something shift, a purpose beyond redemption, a desire to make things right, not just for himself, but for others. That night, he called his ex-wife Rebecca, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm starting to understand what I did wrong, Beck. Not just to Dr. Carter, but to so many people." Rebecca's tone softened, a rarity since their divorce. "Sophie asked about you today. She misses her dad." Trevor's throat tightened. "I'm trying to be someone she can be proud of again." By the 4th month, Trevor had transitioned to a full-time role at New Horizons, his salary a fraction of his CEO pay, but enough to cover his modest apartment. He'd sold his Savile Row suits and traded his BMW for a used sedan, shedding the trappings of a life built on privilege. His therapy sessions, recommended by Aisha, were grueling. Dr. Ellis, a specialist in bias and prejudice, pushed him to unpack his upbringing. Private schools, country clubs, a world where exclusivity was code for exclusion. You equated wealth and whiteness with belonging, Dr. Ellis said. Why Trevor struggled to answer, tracing his assumptions to a childhood where difference was suspect, to a career where pleasing wealthy white guests meant promotions. I thought I was protecting something valuable, he admitted. But I was protecting a lie. Dr. Ellis nodded. Change isn't a moment, Trevor. It's a lifelong commitment to unlearning. Trevor took her words to heart, volunteering to speak at a local hospitality conference about his mistakes. Standing before a skeptical crowd, he shared the story of ejecting James Carter, his voice shaking as he described the fallout. I thought I was upholding standards, but I was upholding prejudice. It cost me my career, but more importantly, it hurt people who deserved better. Some attendees walked out, but others stayed asking questions, sharing their own struggles with bias. For Trevor, it was a small victory, a step toward turning his failure into something useful. At home, Trevor kept James's card on his desk, a reminder of the man who'd offered him a path forward instead of leaving him to drown in shame. He'd written James a letter, unsent, thanking him for the chance to learn. But doubts lingered. Could he ever make up for the 47 guests he'd wronged? Could he face Sophie knowing she'd one day learn her father had been fired for discrimination? One evening as he packed up at New Horizons, Maria stopped by with her sons, who handed him a crayon drawing of a house with a smiling family. "For you, Mr. Trevor," the older boy said. Trevor's eyes stung. This was what James had meant. Learning meant action, not just apologies. He taped the drawing to his fridge, a symbol of why he kept going. His phone buzzed with an email from Aisha, an invitation to speak at another conference, this time alongside other executives who'd faced similar reckonings. Trevor hesitated, then typed a reply. "I'm in." He wasn't running anymore. He was learning one painful step at a time, and somewhere in Chicago, Dr. James Carter was building a legacy that Trevor was determined to support, even if it meant facing his past every day. Spring sunlight poured through the Grand Meridian Hotel's soaring lobby windows, casting warm prisms across the marble floor, where 6 months earlier, Dr. James Carter had been publicly humiliated. The space felt different now, not just in its golden glow, but in its energy, a warmth that went beyond crystal chandeliers and orchids in crystal vases. The Grand Meridian had transformed into a beacon of true hospitality where every guest, regardless of background, was welcomed with genuine respect. James stood near the concierge desk, his emerald silk tie catching the light, as he observed the morning check-in process with quiet pride. At 38, he carried the weight of his role as Regional Director of International Grandeur Holdings' North American Division. With ease, his charcoal suit sharp against his dark skin. His brown eyes scanning the lobby with the focus of a leader who'd fought for this change. Under his leadership, the hotel had become a model of inclusion. Its staff trained in the anti-bias program James had first outlined in his graduate thesis a decade ago. Gerald Morrison, now promoted to general manager, moved between stations with calm efficiency, ensuring a family from Lagos felt as valued as a tech mogul from Silicon Valley. James's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Heard the Meridian's the place to be now." "You did that, man." James smiled, typing back, "We did that." The "we" included Aisha Patel, the Director of Diversity and Inclusion, who'd become his right hand in reshaping the company's culture, and the staff who'd embraced the vision of a hotel where everyone belonged. Aisha approached her tablet, glowing with data, her eyes sparkling with accomplishment. "Morning, Dr. Carter. The quarterly numbers are in. Want the good news?" James nodded, leaning against the concierge desk. Always. Aisha swiped through her screen. Revenues up 23% from last year. Guest satisfaction scores hit an all-time high across all demographics, 98.7th percentile. And we've recovered 78% of the business lost due to past discriminatory practices. James felt a surge of pride, not just for the numbers, but for what they represented: a hotel that welcomed everyone from the elderly black couple celebrating their 50th anniversary to the young Latina entrepreneur reviewing her pitch in the lounge. "What about the other properties?" he asked. Aisha's smile widened. "Boston's bookings from guests of color are up 31%. Miami's staff reported their highest employee satisfaction ever. And get this, 3 competitors reached out asking if we'd consult on their diversity programs." James laughed, shaking his head. "They're paying attention now." Aisha nodded. "What you've built here, it's becoming the gold standard for luxury hospitality." The words hit James deeply. 6 months ago, he'd been escorted out of this very lobby, accused of fraud for daring to exist in a space Trevor Hamilton deemed unfit for him. Now he stood as its leader, watching his vision of inclusive hospitality ripple across an industry. The lobby buzzed with life guests from Mumbai, checking in for a tech conference, a Japanese family marveling at the chandeliers, a black businessman in a power suit chatting with Gerald about local jazz clubs. This was what James had fought for: a space where excellence meant excellence for all. Gerald approached, clipboard in hand, his expression one of professional pride and personal gratitude. "Dr. Carter, the 10 a.m. meeting is ready in conference room B." "He's been waiting about 10 minutes. James checked his watch, his stomach tightening. The meeting had been on his mind for weeks. A moment he'd both anticipated and dreaded. "Is he there?" Gerald nodded. "As requested." James turned to Aisha. "Join me, I might need a witness." They walked through the lobby toward the elevator bank, passing guests whose diversity reflected the world beyond Chicago's skyline. James's reflection caught in the glass doors, the same doors that had sealed his humiliation 6 months ago. Today, he moved through them with purpose, carrying the weight of leadership and the hope of lasting change. In conference room B, Trevor Hamilton stood as James and Aisha entered his appearance, a stark contrast to the polished CEO of 6 months prior. Gone were the Savile Row suits, replaced by simple khakis and a navy button-down, his hair shorter, less styled, his face etched with lines that spoke of hard-won wisdom. But it was his eyes that told the real story. Once glacier blue and arrogant, they now held a humility that came from months of reckoning. "Dr. Carter," Trevor said, extending a calloused hand. "Thank you for meeting me." James shook it, noting the roughness earned from months at New Horizons Community Services. "Mr. Hamilton, please sit." They settled around the small mahogany table, James and Aisha on one side, Trevor on the other, the distant hum of Chicago traffic filtering through the 42nd floor windows. "You look well," James said, meaning it. Trevor's smile was genuine, a far cry from the cold grin he'd flashed in the lobby. "I feel different. Better, I think. These past 6 months have been the hardest of my life, but also the most meaningful." James leaned back, curious. "Tell me about it." Trevor took a breath, gathering his thoughts. "After our talk in the storage unit, I didn't leave Chicago. I stayed and started volunteering at New Horizons, helping families find housing. I'm a full-time housing coordinator now, working with people I used to overlook. Single mothers, immigrants, people of color, people I judged without knowing." Aisha leaned forward, her voice measured. "How has that changed your perspective?" Trevor met her gaze. "It's shown me that dignity isn't tied to wealth or status. I've met kids smarter than I ever was stuck in schools that don't have enough books. Families working 3 jobs just to afford a 1-bedroom. I used to think my hotel was the pinnacle of success, but I was blind to what real struggle looks like. James nodded, his expression neutral but attentive. You completed the bias training program. Trevor's eyes lit up with quiet pride. Every module. Not because I had to, but because I needed to understand why I made the choices I did. Your thesis, Dr. Carter, it laid it all bare. I thought I was colorblind, but I was just ignoring the impact of my assumptions. Aisha raised an eyebrow. What did you learn about impact versus intent? Trevor's voice grew softer. That intent doesn't matter if the outcome hurts people. I thought I was protecting my hotel's standards, but I was pushing people out, making them feel less than. The training helped me see how my biases about race, about class, shaped every decision I made. James studied him, searching for signs of performance. He found none, only the weariness of someone who'd done the hard work of unlearning. You've been speaking at conferences, James said, sharing your story. Trevor nodded, a rueful smile crossing his face. It's not easy being the cautionary tale. Some people walk out when I talk about ejecting you from the lobby, but others stay, ask questions, admit they've made similar mistakes. If I can stop one person from doing what I did, it's worth the discomfort. Aisha's expression softened slightly. How's that been received? Mixed, Trevor admitted. Some call me brave, others call me a hypocrite. But I keep going. I owe it to the 47 guests I wronged, to you, to my daughter Sophie, to be better. Trevor reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table. I wanted to give you this. James opened it, revealing a handwritten letter on plain stationery. His eyes widened as he read. You're donating your severance package to create a scholarship fund. Trevor nodded. The Trevor Hamilton Scholarship for Hospitality Excellence. Full tuition for students from underrepresented backgrounds studying hospitality management. I can't undo what I did, but I can help the industry have leaders who reflect the world, not just the elite. James looked up, stunned. This is your entire severance. How will you live? Trevor's smile was self-deprecating. My salary at New Horizons is enough. I don't need much anymore. Turns out you can live well without a $400,000 PTO check and a company car. Aisha shook her head, clearly impressed. This is significant, Mr. Hamilton. It's the least I can do. Trevor set his eyes on James. Dr. Carter, I know I can't fully make up for what I did to you, to those other guests, but I hope this is a start. James folded the letter carefully, his mind racing. 6 months ago, this man had humiliated him, questioned his right to exist in a space he'd earned. Now Trevor sat before him, transformed by accountability into someone working to dismantle the systems he'd once upheld. James stood walking to the window overlooking Chicago's bustling streets. Mr. Hamilton, do you know what happened to Harrison Blackwell, the guest who praised your service recovery that night? Trevor winced. I heard he lost a big contract. James nodded. A $50 million municipal deal. Chicago doesn't do business with companies that endorse discrimination. He called me last month asking for help, understanding his mistake. I sent him to New Horizons. He starts volunteering next week. Trevor's eyes widened. You helped him. I gave him the same chance I gave you. James said, turning back. Change requires action, not just regret. He returned to his seat, exchanging a glance with Aisha, who nodded subtly. They'd discussed this possibility, though neither had fully believed it would come to this. Mr. Hamilton, I have a proposition, James said, his voice steady. IGH is expanding our bias training program to include a speaker bureau executives who've made mistakes and learned from them, sharing their stories to prevent others from repeating them. We'd like you to consider joining as an independent contractor, speaking at hotels, conferences, business schools. Trevor's mouth fell open. You want me to work with IGH again? After everything, not for us, with us, James clarified. Paid engagements, quarterly evaluations, continued training under Aisha's oversight. It won't be easy, but your story could prevent countless incidents like ours. Trevor's eyes glistened. 6 months ago, I threw you out of this hotel because of my prejudice. Now you're offering me a chance to make sure it never happens again. James leaned forward. That's what redemption looks like, Mr. Hamilton. Not erasing the past, but turning it into something that helps others. Trevor nodded slowly. I'll think about it. I don't know what to say. Say you'll consider it, James said. The industry needs voices like yours, people who have done the work to change. As they stood to leave, Trevor spoke once more. Dr. Carter, why? After what I did, why give me this chance? James paused at the door, his answer deliberate. Because 6 months ago, you saw a black man and decided he didn't belong. Today, that same man is offering you a path to ensure it never happens again. That's not just your redemption, Mr. Hamilton. It's the change we all need. As James walked back through the lobby, Gerald handed him a note from Dr. and Mrs. Thompson, the Atlanta professors who'd been discriminated against a year earlier. Dear Dr. Carter, it read we returned to the Grand Meridian last week and felt truly welcomed for the first time. Thank you for restoring our faith in hospitality. James folded the note, his heart full. This was why he'd fought not for headlines or accolades, but for the families, the travelers, the people who deserved dignity. One more thing, Gerald said, his voice warm. Thank you for giving us all a chance to be part of something better. James smiled. We all had that chance, Gerald. We just needed a reminder of what hospitality means. As he stepped toward the glass doors, his reflection caught in the same panes that had closed behind him 6 months ago. Now he left by choice, carrying the satisfaction of justice served and a legacy built. Outside, the Chicago evening unfolded the Grand Meridian's lights reflecting off the river. Somewhere, Trevor was likely finishing his shift at New Horizons, helping another family find a home. Aisha was reviewing scholarship applications, ensuring new leaders would rise. And here the hotel stood as proof that change was possible when courage trumped comfort. What spaces in your life could be more inclusive? What small action could you take to make someone feel valued? The most powerful transformations begin with a single choice: to see others as they are human beings deserving of respect. James's journey and Trevor's showed that accountability, action, and empathy could reshape not just a hotel, but an industry, a city, a world. The Grand Meridian's lobby, once a stage for exclusion, now embodied its founding motto. Carved near the elevators, hospitality is the art of making strangers feel at home. For the first time in years, those words rang true, a testament to the power of change driven by those willing to fight for it.